Hi, everybody. It's December 11, 2019. There is so much going on now, and it's going on fast and furiously. The changes are radical. It's happening, and we're going down fast. Overwhelming. I look at my news sites, and I have no clue what to post because everything is really important. So let me just go over some important information. 5,135 inventions that were under secrecy orders at the end of fiscal year 2010. That is a 1% rise over the year before and the highest total in more than a decade. What are these inventions? Most of the listed technology areas are closely related to military applications. So, under the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, patent applications on new inventions can be subject to secrecy orders, restricting their publication if government agencies believe that disclosure would be detrimental to the national security. And you know how much our government wants to keep us safe. They're not publicly available. And Freedom of Information Act requests have been denied. What is that technology? What are those patents? Is it technology used against us? May very well be. Okay. Leadership strips approved anti-war measures from National Defense Authorization Act. We have one party. One, not two. So Trump supporters, please reevaluate that support, because that support is actually helping to bring us down rapidly. All right. There were anti-war amendments in the National Defense Authorization Act that were removed. All of the limitations that the House voted on and approved have been stripped away. And once again, we're giving a whole lot of money to the military. Because ordinary Americans don't need any help. We just have to keep you safe, Americans. That's our job. We've got to fight over there so we don't have to fight over here. Yes, protecting your freedom. Have you noticed that your freedom is being stripped away? So, the House bill included the latest attempt to use the power of the purse to end U.S. military involvement in Yemen. Yemen, we've got this military involvement in Yemen. Why are we in Yemen? Most Americans have no idea about Yemen. And wow, are we killing an awful lot of people in Yemen? Because Yemen, I guess, is got to kill them because they threaten our freedom. And they're a threat to the United States. Really? Okay. Frankly, I don't even think it matters that you know why we're in Yemen. The fact that we are in Yemen is enough for you to know that something is wrong. The National Defense Authorization Act also stripped away an attempt to, well, I don't know, maybe follow the law, the Constitution, that thing. It preemptively aimed to forbid an unauthorized United States attack on Iran. The language is gone now. and you read these articles and you're like, okay, while theoretically the president is meant to be forbidden from unauthorized attacks, theoretically, that's not the way recent administrations have treated the law. Oh, okay. Democrat and Republican have been violating the Constitution left and right. One administration to the next. Doesn't matter. We only have one party. And nobody seems to care about that. Well, is this important? Yeah. At its core, a lot of the language in the House bill was aimed at giving Congress more specific say on how the military is to carry out certain operations, and more importantly, certain things that it is absolutely not to do. The military. This was presented as necessary because congressional Democrats were worried about President Trump acting unilaterally, but they weren't worried about Obama acting unilaterally, which he did. So, more or less, all of this was stripped away, even backing away from border wall restrictions that were one of the first things put in place in the House bill. Okay. We do not have 3 branches of government that, are checking each branch's power. That was how this government was constructed. Checks and balances. We haven't had that government in a really, really, really long time. In fact, it was really shocking to me to see Congress, left and right, allow Obama to usurp congressional power. And they were just, well, take it away, take it away, take it away. I thought that was really unusual. That was a long, long time ago. So, we've got a king. And that king is a puppet. Strings pulled by the Wizard of Oz. Why is all of this important? Well, relates to this. Documents prove Bush, Obama, and Trump all lied, sent troops to die in Afghanistan for no reason. Yes, the Afghanistan papers. Do you know anything about this? Has mainstream media even covered this? To those who have been paying attention, it is no secret that the U.S. government has been lying to its citizens for centuries, from granting the power to coin money, to the private Federal Reserve, to the war on terror, to the endless wars spawned by the war on terror. The United States government should change its official language from English to lie. Documents proved that have recently been obtained prove a vast conspiracy by United States government officials to deceive the American people into thinking the war in Afghanistan was winnable. Is it just Afghanistan? How about Iraq? How about Vietnam? This has been going on. It's like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Really? Doing the same thing? Well, what is that? The definition of insanity. And that's the American people. And it has been the American people generation after generation. So, spoiler alert, every single one of the insiders in D.C. knew, without a doubt, that it was not winnable, but you were lied to. Since the beginning of the war, the Afghans have been slaughtered. The country has become a hotbed for terrorists. They have drastically increased heroin production. And this year, the U.S. was found to have killed more people than the terrorists we were ostensibly fighting. The once beautiful nation has been turned into a pit of rubble by years of bombing and war. The U.S. taxpayer has funded it all. And Americans, you really think you're not complicit with the evil that has been going on forever? It's only gotten worse. The U.S. government has openly funded, supported, and armed various terrorist networks throughout the world to forward an agenda of destabilization and proxy war. It is not a secret nor a conspiracy theory. America arms bad guys. The situation has gotten so overtly corrupt that the government admitted in May the Pentagon asked Congress for funding to reimburse terrorists for their transportation and other expenses. Seriously. It's frightening. You know, the condition of the American people, it's frightening. That nothing stirs them anymore. Nothing. Our Pentagon asked Congress for funding to reimburse terrorists for their transportation and other expenses. Seriously. The American people have been told that this war in Afghanistan, which is slaughtering innocent women and children, is to protect their freedom. In reality, however, this war has made Americans less free by creating an assembly line of terrorists and police state measures, ensuring a vicious cycle of rights violations and attacks for generations to come. All of this bloodshed, death, terrorism, loss of liberty, limbless veterans, PTSD, heroin epidemics, and trillions in taxpayer dollars wasted have been the product of politicians lying to you. That's why I have said, lying. Everything goes under the umbrella of the lie. And that's what we are exceptional at. The lie started this country. The lie is ending this country. Every data point about American efforts that was altered to present the best picture possible. That from Bob Crowley, an Army colonel and former senior counterinsurgency advisor to military commander in Afghanistan. He said this too. Surveys, for instance, were totally unreliable, but reinforced that everything we were doing was right, and we became a self-licking ice cream cone. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking. That from Douglas Lute, Afghan war czar, under Bush II and Obama. Back in 2015, Jeffrey Eggers, a former Navy SEAL and a staffer for the Bush II and Obama administrations asked, what did we get for this $1 trillion effort? A whole lot of suffering, death, terror, and the destruction of a country. Great. The most damning admissions in the report was from Michael Flynn, the Director of Intelligence for the International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan from June 2009 to October 2010, who would later serve briefly as Donald Trump's national security advisor before leaving the post in disgrace. He said, after 2006, for me, it was actually irrelevant because we were just killing so many people and it wasn't making any difference at all. Great. Commanders and policymakers on the spectrum of news, they want always to be good news. Operational commanders, State Department policymakers, and Department of Defense policymakers are going to be inherently rosy in their assessments. They will be unaccepting of hard-hitting intelligence. Flynn pointed out that this problem wasn't just a few key players deceiving their rulers in D.C. The lies were widespread, literally everyone. This was true for every commander. They all said when they left, they accomplished the mission. Every single commander, not one commander, is going to leave Afghanistan or Iraq or any place. Not one is going to leave and say, you know what, we didn't accomplish our mission. Wow, the lying. There is corruption in reporting, and not just corruption in the theft that occurred. That also includes from the State Department. And that was Flynn as well. When the blowhards, including Bush, Obama, and Trump, took to the pulpits, they told us that they would be pulling out the troops. Yet all of them have maintained a presence, knowing full well that the only thing it was accomplishing was death. What it was accomplishing was an awful lot of profit making for our military-industrial complex. So, yeah, support your troops. Question mark? This was a pretty good article, The Great American Shakedown. This from Chris Hedges. Some things, I don't agree with everything that anyone says, but it drives home, in summary, the Great American Shakedown. The Democrat Party and its liberal supporters are perplexed. They presented hours of evidence of an impeachable offense, although they studiously avoided charging Donald Trump with impeachable offenses also carried out by Democratic presidents, including the continuation or expansion of presidential wars not declared by Congress. And just like Bush and just like Obama, Trump, too, said, I ain't going to be signing that NDAA if you hold me accountable to that oath I took to protect the Constitution. I want that thing about Iran out of there. No authorization is needed. If I want to strike Iran, I'm going to do it. And that's how we roll. So, yeah, presidential wars not declared by Congress, exercising line item veto power, playing prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner to kill individuals, including U.S. citizens, anywhere on the planet, violating due process and misusing executive orders, because civics is no longer taught in most American schools. They apparently devoted a day to constitutional scholars who provided the Civics 101 case for impeachment. The liberal press, cheerleading the impeachment process, saturated the media landscape with live coverage, analysis, character assassination of Trump, giddy speculation. All of it made not one bit of difference. Not one bit of difference. Liberal class and the Democratic Party leadership, along with the traditional Republican elites, have squandered their credibility. No one believes them, and no one should. Our failure to hold any of these lying disgusting creatures in the federal government and the White House, how we did not hold anybody accountable. Well, I guess the American people have lost their credibility as well. But yeah, everything has just gotten worse. Every administration, it just keeps getting worse. They squandered their credibility, liberals and Republicans squandered their credibility by promising that the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, would, as claimed by President Bill Clinton, create 200,000 new, well-paying jobs per year. Instead, several million jobs were lost. They squandered it by allowing corporations to move production overseas and hire foreign workers at daily wages that did not equal what a U.S. unionized worker made in an hour, a situation that obliterated the bargaining power of the American working class. They squandered it by allowing corporations to use the threat of offshoring production to destroy unions, suppress wages, extract draconian concessions, and push millions of workers into the temp and gig economies where there are no benefits or job security and pay is 60% or less of what a full-time employee in the regular economy receives. They squandered it by forcing working men and women to take 2 or 3 jobs to support a family, jacking up household debt to $13.95 trillion. They squandered it by redirecting wealth upward so that during the Clinton administration alone, 45% of all income growth went to the wealthiest 1%. You know, am I wrong for saying that Americans really love their delusion? This has been going on for decades. The Democrats, the Republicans. Clinton, it was during Clinton's years. Get rid of Glass-Steagall, you know, that protected Americans from having their money that they deposited into commercial banks, from that money being invested, taken out. And Glass-Steagall was that act that actually, the repeal of Glass-Steagall allowed for the 2008 crash. Do you hear any candidate for the presidency talk about Glass-Steagall? How about Trump? Oh my God, there are so many obviouses that it would be so easy to fix so many of our problems, and somehow they never get fixed, Democrat or Republican. And meanwhile, while Americans hang on to their delusion and stay stuck in that matrix believing that we have 2 parties and fight one another, more and more Americans are getting destroyed. They squandered it by wiping out small farmers in Mexico, driving some 3 million of them off their lands and forcing many to migrate in desperation to the United States, a human tide that saw the U.S. right wing and President Trump direct mounting rage toward immigrants. They squandered it by turning our great cities into urban wastelands. They squandered it by slashing welfare and social service programs. They squandered it by supporting endless feudal wars that have an overall price tag of between 5 to 7 trillion. They squandered it by setting up a surveillance system to spy on every American and then lie about it. They squandered it by catering to the big banks and gutting financial regulations, precipitating the 2008 economic meltdown. They squandered it by looting the U.S. Treasury to bail out banks and financial firms guilty of massive financial crimes, ordering the Federal Reserve to hand over an estimated $29 trillion to the global financiers responsible for the crash. And we listened to our former Attorney General under Obama say, we are not going to prosecute banksters for their fraud. He came right out and publicly stated, those who are committing crimes, fraud, we're not going to prosecute, because if we do, it will hurt the economy. And Americans asleep at the wheel. We have been told over and over and over again, we here in government will pretend we represent you. We're even going to come out and say things that any idiot would understand. We don't really have a government. We've got a criminal organization in Washington, D.C., and they have this two-tiered justice system, and those, their buddies or those who are bringing everybody down, essentially the 1%, we're going to let them commit crimes. But you jaywalk, and that's it. It's really sad. They squandered it by not using this staggering sum, the $29 trillion, to pay for free college tuition, universal health care, repair our crumbling infrastructure, transition to clean energy, forgive student debt, raise wages, bail out underwater homeowners, form public banks to foster investments in our communities at low interest rates, provide a guaranteed minimum income, and organize a massive jobs program for the unemployed and underemployed, whose ranks are at least double official statistics. They squandered it by cutting child assistance programs, most drastically during the Clinton administration, resulting in 16 million children going to bed hungry. But it takes a village. That's what Hillary said. They squandered it by leaving over 500,000 Americans homeless and on the streets on any given day. They squandered it by passing laws that keep students burdened by massive college loan debt that has climbed to $1.4 trillion. Debt they cannot free themselves from, even if they declare bankruptcy, because you cannot declare bankruptcy of student loans. Student loans exempt. They squandered it by militarizing police, building the world's largest system of mass incarceration, one with 25% of the world's prison population. They squandered it by revoking due process. Oof, that's really important. Yeah, that was that guy who walks on water, Obama. Habeas corpus. They squandered it by passing massive tax cuts for the rich and for corporations, many of which, such as Amazon, pay no federal income tax, ballooning the federal deficit to now $779 billion and climbing. They squandered it by privatizing everything from intelligence gathering to public education to swell corporate bank accounts at taxpayer expense. They squandered it by permitting corporate money an estimated $9.9 billion will be spent this presidential election cycle on political advertising to buy politicians in a form of legalized bribery that sees corporate lobbyists write legislation. That's where this legislation comes from. Corporate lobbyists bring it to a representative in Congress, and they're told to introduce it under that rep's name. They squandered it by doing nothing to halt the looming ecocide. The mortal wounds inflicted on our democratic institutions are bipartisan. The traditional Republican elites are as hated as the Democratic elites. Trump is vile, imbecilic, corrupt, incompetent, but for a largely white working class cast aside by austerity and neoliberalism, he at least taunts the elites who destroyed their communities and their lives. And I believe that's his role. That's his job. The shakedown orchestrated by the elites who rule over America's working men and women took from those workers their hope, and more ominously, their hope for their children. It took from them security and a sense of place and dignity. It took from them a voice in how they were governed. It took from them their country and handed it to a cabal of global corporatists who intend to turn them into serfs. This shakedown plunged millions into despair. It led many to self-destructive opioid, alcohol, drug, gambling addictions. It led to increases in suicide, mass shootings, hate crimes, end of the rule of law, and the destruction of democratic institutions that, if they had continued to function, could have prevented the rise to power of a demagogue such as Trump. Didn't matter. Presidents are selected. There is zero chance Trump will be removed from office in a trial in the Senate. They argued, the Democratic Party. They argued their civic and constitutional duty, but here again, they lie. They picked out what was convenient to impeach Trump and left untouched the rotten system they helped create. The divisions among Americans will only widen, the hatreds will only grow, and tyranny will wrap its deadly tentacles around our throats. Can you feel it getting tighter? Because if you can't feel it getting tighter, then you don't have the big picture of everything that is taking place. The whole impeachment hearing crap was a distraction. Distraction from the economy, distraction from more surveillance taking place, distraction from, Agenda 2030 continues. So, it's upsetting. It's very upsetting. If people can't get out of the matrix and really try to figure out what's going on in this country, and they got to get out of that matrix, well, yesterday, and hit the streets running to try to save their own hide. And the likelihood of that happening, well, I'll let you answer it. But at this point, the shakedown has been going on for decades, only becoming more obvious and in our face. And frankly, we didn't do a thing about it. Yeah, all links are below.